Greetings, Star Warriors. Welcome to the Outer Rim. Kathleen Kennedy is not pulling her weight. She's not doing her job, and she needs to be replaced. Is it a surprise that I'm saying this? No, absolutely not. But it is a surprise that a well-known film critic, Kristian Harloff, is saying this. Well, he said something along those lines anyway. But I guess I can let him speak for himself. Before I play the clip where Kristian Harloff made his statements, I do need to make clear that he rambled a lot and he repeated himself a lot, so I did cut up his statements to cut away the fat and leave his main idea intact. This sort of thing happens very easily when you're making live statements, and so that's not a criticism of him at all. I just didn't want this to be an hour-long video. So, without further ado, I present you Kristian Harloff.
I think that Dave Filoni should be the guy creatively. I think Kathleen Kennedy should be producing. She's a fantastic producer. She's a great producer. My point is that she was the one that came out in 2014, and they had this new thing to do in Star Wars that no other franchise ever could do or did, and that's everything we do, comics, TV shows, it's all part of one big timeline. She is the one that said it all connects. So when she says it, she should be out there talking about the biggest moment in Rebels that happened. I'd love to see her and Filoni. She's in charge of the production, he's in charge of the creative, because when you watch Rebels, that guy gets it.
Okay, so in order to understand why this is such a relevant thing and such a surprise, you kind of have to understand who Kristian Harloff is. I know some of you will be very familiar with him, and some of you will not. So I guess I should just sort of explain a little bit. If you're unaware of who Kristian Harloff is, he is a well-known host for Collider Videos, the YouTube channel. He is also a host alongside his co-host, Mark Ellis, on the YouTube channel Schmoes Know. Mostly they review movies and they criticize movies, and they're pretty much professionals at it. About a year and a half ago, I used to watch them religiously almost every day on Collider Movie Talk. I didn't really watch Schmoes Know for some reason. I don't know why. Both are YouTube channels, but I only watched the one. After a while, my feelings toward their credibility changed drastically to where I would no longer watch the show. When it came to big-time blockbuster Hollywood films that one studio or another sunk a lot of money into, and they were expecting far, far more money, these guys would always give it rave reviews. To make a long story short, these guys were steeped in Disney Star Wars content, books, comic books, cartoons, everything that Disney did with Star Wars they seemed to love. But they bashed the prequels regularly. I don't know if I should say they. Kristian Harloff did. His partner, Mark Ellis, wasn't so much of a prequel basher, but Harloff definitely was. Now, I did read one or two of the Disney Star Wars novels, and they were mediocre at best, nothing to rave about. And of course I saw The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, and they were terrible movies. Disney was not making good Star Wars movies, but these guys seemed to love them, and I find it very disingenuous for them to bash the prequels, because they were not worse movies than what Disney was doing. But Harloff has a huge audience, and his opinion goes a long way with people, and he would get them to spend their money on terrible movies. And he might even convince them to actually like some of them. It is my belief that in exchange for a good review, Disney executives and actors, Harloff would get, access to important VIPs in Hollywood. I know even Mark Hamill was a guest on, it was either Schmoes Know or Movie Talk at one point, so, when their 5-star review of The Last Jedi came out and all they could really do was bash Canto Bight, I wasn't in the least bit surprised. Everyone was bashing Canto Bight. It was almost as if Disney had given them that mandate. Only bash Canto Bight, but say nothing bad about anything else in the film. Well, now, for whatever reason, Harloff has stopped pulling his punches. And there's some truth coming out. He doesn't like the job that Kathleen Kennedy is doing, at least with creative. But I guess he's got more to say. As I said before, he repeats his main ideas over and over again, but you should still hear this.
I'm never going to say no more Star Wars movies. Give me more, try to way to improve it. Dave Filoni, and I've said it many times, is the heir apparent, and he's not getting a chance in the creative seat. He should be looked at not just because he's the voiceover or because he's the animation guy. I think that is wrong. I think the same reason we talked about this on Movie Talk, to where Claudia Gray, Christy Golden, James Luceno, let them write scripts, but no, they're the novel people, so they don't get looked at. And it just said a lot to me when one of the biggest moments in Rebels, and Kathleen Kennedy is nowhere to be found. She's never been in a recon. And it seems to be, well, that's their thing. This is mine. You're the one that made the announcement in 2014 that it all counts. Where are you?
So Harloff seems very reasonable here. I don't watch Rebels. I stopped after the first season. I didn't hate the show, but it just wasn't doing anything for me, so I just stopped. Haven't really said anything about it since then. But I did love the Clone Wars. That was a great show. It did have, it was hit or miss, but when it was hit, it was dead on, man. It was awesome, amazing stuff. So Dave Filoni does seem like a relatively good choice, probably as good as they're going to get to replace Kathleen Kennedy on creative, if Disney was to look for a replacement for her from within Lucasfilm.
Because on movie making, Kathleen Kennedy is fantastic at making films, putting things together, because as much as we say that she's had problems with Lord and Miller. She had problems with J.J. Abrams from what we hear behind the scenes. She had problems with Colin Trevorrow, and she's had these problems, right? Mm-hmm. And what's his face from Gareth Edwards. Mm-hmm. She's had these problems. Well, she made them all work. Yeah. As a producer, regardless of what you might think about the story, and that's a separate issue, as a producer, she makes it work. She finds a way to connect them, to find it, to solve the problem. She is a problem solver.
Here is where I have some contention with what he's saying. I mean, it's not necessarily her making anything work. It's the money that Disney is willing to throw into the projects that she is overseeing that is ultimately making everything work. Kathleen Kennedy is not so much a problem solver as she is a problem starter. If she didn't hire bad directors or inexperienced directors, or for whatever reason the wrong directors, she wouldn't need to fire these people so regularly. Firing directors costs time, which costs money. I heard somewhere that the Solo film needed to do 75% reshoots. How much money did that cost? Indeterminable at this time, but I can guarantee you it was millions of dollars. Firing directors is not unheard of. Warner Bros. Has done it for the DC universe, and Disney has done it for the Marvel universe. But both of those companies have fired a much smaller percentage of the directors that they've hired over the last 10 years than Kathleen Kennedy has fired over the last 5 or 6 years. Kennedy has a terrible track record with directors, and that's bad news no matter how you cut it. You can't say that she's making it work when the money isn't hers. Disney is making it work, and she's spending their money.
There is no argument there. There is nothing that can be said about her as a producer. But the creative, something's happening. Something is not working overall creative. I'm not saying, and I would never be like, fire her, fire him, fire. That's ridiculous.
Maybe you wouldn't, but you're not a Disney executive. If you were, maybe you would be more considerate of your bottom line, and you would consider a more experienced CEO for Lucasfilm.
What sounds to me, if I'm breaking it down, that's what you want. Is you want her to ascend or stay where she is, more of a studio head.
Yeah, a studio head. Let
Filoni
him
guide
take charge
this
of the creative.
ship, or someone.
Okay, so I failed to mention earlier that there are 2 other people involved in this conversation, and they just chimed in, as you heard. But did you catch what the guy said? When he was trying to clarify Kristian Harloff's point, he mentioned that you want her to ascend. In other words, sort of get a raise. Even though I'm not familiar with the guy, it is obvious that he is a big shill for Disney and probably a dozen other big movie studios. Harloff is making the argument that Kathleen Kennedy has been doing a bad job, and so this guy's obvious interpretation of that is that she should be able to ascend.
Let Filoni work with the directors. Let Filoni work with the story group. Let Filoni drive the narrative, and then report to Kathleen Kennedy and say, we need this, 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 and this.
Right.
Who should we get? Let's take these meetings and that's how you work. Like, I don't feel like he's being utilized. He's only being used in animation.
But in comparing her to a Kevin Feige, When you read interviews with Feige, there is an attention to fans of the source material.
Right.
There's a knowledge you can tell he has with the given movie he's talking about right now, but also how it pertains to the larger MCU. And I can't think of all that many in-depth Kathleen Kennedy interviews that really have struck me from a creative level.
Yes.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with that either. I think blending her abilities with a Filoni or someone like Filoni, I don't know if there's someone else in Lucasfilm who can do what he does, but I think he is a fantastic option. That is the perfect collaboration.
That is
to
a
me.
great point there.
So now they've found their softball way to spin this idea to get Kathleen Kennedy out of the way without firing her. There's several problems with this right off the bat. First, they haven't said anything to prove that Kathleen Kennedy working alongside Filoni would be the perfect combination. They just agreed that it would be for some reason. And second, there is no guarantee that Kathleen Kennedy would go for that to begin with. These two people are showing an extreme lack of empathy. What if their bosses came to them and said, we're going to give you far less control over than you've had in the past, but, you can keep your job? A lot of people would accept that. But Kathleen Kennedy was given her position by George Lucas himself, and she has used that position in order to push her political agenda from a creative standpoint. She's just as likely to walk away from Lucasfilm and Disney altogether as she is to share responsibility with Dave Filoni. And you know what? If she did walk away, then Disney would just hire some other producer, and some months or maybe a year down the line, this same group of people right here would be saying how Dave Filoni and whatever the producer's name is would be are turning out to be a perfect combination. So really saying these people who have never worked together in that capacity before is a perfect combination is completely meaningless bluster.
Because that is the point that I'm trying to make here. When you hear Feige talk about Marvel, he'll give you specific examples, he'll go deep cut, he'll make a lot of the movies deep cutty to where you'd be like, oh, maybe that's too inside baseball. But when you hear Kathleen Kennedy and when you hear her talk about Star Wars, it feels like she's just giving the standard answer. She never really goes deep cutting into Star Wars. She's never really gone into the fact, I'm not saying she's not a fan of the property, otherwise she wouldn't have taken the job.
What? Why did you wait till now to say something completely dumb and untrue? People take high-paying jobs all the time when they're not fans of the company they're working for. If she's not promoting the books and if she's not promoting the cartoon, then it's a good chance you didn't read the books. It's a good chance you didn't even watch the cartoon. It's an incredibly high-paying and prestigious job. I would have to think that that's the first reason why she accepted it. And there's also a good chance that she will not accept a lesser station. Anyway, there was much more to this discussion than what I have here, so I will post a link to their video down below so that you guys can watch it on your own. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and as always, if you're listening, you are the new rebellion. You are the new rebellion. You are the new rebellion.